Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of East Meets West. Today, we have our special guest, courtesy of her hoop stats, the legendary, because he all over the place too, just like you, Con. Alford Corriette, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. I appreciate the legendary. That's the first time I think I've ever been called that, so I'll take it.
Yeah, you know, I've been following you for a minute, so you know.
I know.
Yeah, you've been doing your thing, bro.
I know. I think everyone who's tuning in, they're going to see this. They're like, oh my God, my two favorite WNBA draft analysts are on the show. Right. That's right. Alford Corriette, Conrad. But I didn't promise any bait and switch, right? Today, we are not talking about the WNBA draft. We'll have plenty of time to do that. Today, Alfred's here to talk about the team that he covers, the New York Liberty. We're in the home stretch. We're entering the final week of the season. But before we actually dive in to the New York Liberty, I mean, Alfred is well-versed in a lot of things, you know, hoop-related.
Yeah.
And as a guy who is like from the New Jersey area, you know, I think everyone knows the New York Liberty, their owners, Joe Clarissai. They also own the Brooklyn Nets, formerly the New Jersey Nets. So we got to get this question out of the way first, Alfred. You know, in your opinion, in your mind, did Scott McKnight lead the Nets to an NBA title? And if he did, did he retire as a Knight or as a Net?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think, you know, if you can come off a ACL, MCL injury and, you know, come back for the playoffs in like 2-3 months and then lead your team to the finals, I mean, you had to do it the next year, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, amongst other things, what makes Alfred's coverage of the Liberty and the WNBA draft so unique is how I think, Alfred, you always do a good job of capturing like the culture with regards to these teams, these prospects, and culture, not just ethnic culture, but like the culture of like the area, you know? And I think, let's kind of going into it. The Liberty, I mean, there's a lot of vibrancy with this team, you know, their branding, the way they kind of promote their players and the team, you know, kind of like I love Stu York, you know, saying like that. There's just a richness to it, which even through the ups and downs of a trying season like this, you know, I think there's still a lot of optimism for what is ahead in this postseason. But I guess before we talk about the playoffs, Alfred, loaded question, but I think we all know about the injuries and like the nature of the injuries. It's like when, say, for example, when Jonquel finally came back, Stewie goes down. When Stewie finally comes back, Sabrina goes down. Like it's weirdly timed, at least in that sense that like at least it's not multiple stars at the same time, but they've played very few games together. So, I mean, having said that, as the defending champs, what is the vibe right now around the team? Like, the season ends next Thursday. Playoffs begin a week from today. Like what's the overall
vibe? Are they mentally ready? Because
Yeah.
It's looking like a collapse somewhat. I know they beat like the Sun, they beat the Mystics, but the other games, and they won last night too against Seattle. But some of those other games look kind of crazy. So go ahead.
I think there's a bit of optimism there around the team because I think like this type of season's probably been unprecedented for a team coming off a championship that I can remember, where you're just decimated by injuries. But I think the good thing is a lot of the players on the current team have had years of playing together, whether it be on New York or other teams or overseas. So they have a good rapport and a good, you know, relationship with each other. So, you know, like the spirits are usually always kept high regardless of what's the case. I mean, a few weeks ago, I think in July, August, you know, members of the team went to Stewie's pottery class, and this was, you know, while Jonquel and others were out. So, you know, it's like they've always found a way of keeping the big picture in mind, in the fact that, okay, this may not have been the best regular season. You know, there's still things to iron out, and we see it on the floor. There's things that they're still working through and trying to figure out. But the playoffs is coming up soon. They've clinched the spot. And the good thing about the playoffs is you reset at 0-0. So it's really starting one game at a time, like once you get into the playoffs and taking it from there. So I think their goal is just, you know, let's get through this regular season. Let's regroup and let's get ready for the playoffs, because anything can happen in the playoffs. And it's just a matter of taking it from there. I mean, Coach Brondello knows that firsthand. I mean, when you look at when she was with the Phoenix Mercury, she faced off against the Chicago Sky team that, you know, finished the season 6th or 7th and ended up winning the championship. So anything is truly possible. It's just a matter of keeping the spirits high, and then let's get ready for the playoffs.
Okay. You guys have a cheat code team. I'm gonna just say that now. Like, ever since you guys got Emma, it's like one game she could drop 20, another game Brianna could drop 20. But I know Jonquil has been kind of shaky a little bit. Like, is she still hurt by any chance? Like, is there a lingering injury going on with her? Because that's my only fear, really, for the Liberty going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Jonquil is recovering. I think the main thing we have to think about, like, especially coming off of injuries that keep you out for a while, is really the conditioning factor and then the travel factor. Because if you think back to 2023, when Jonquil had the foot fracture in the offseason before and then coming back, you know, it took her quite a bit of time to really get into that conditioning mode, because she didn't really have that training camp. And then you saw her really have to, like, work her way into shape. And it took pretty much halfway full of the season to get back into JJ form. So when you have an ankle injury that really takes you out of your rhythm and takes you out of your flow for basically a month of action, and now it's really now having to try to get reacclimated game by game. So I think Jonquil is finding it. But, you know, this has been such a long season. It's more games. Yeah. Liberty are just trying to, you know, finish and get back. But I can understand, like, why people would say, like, will have questions like, is JJ all right? You know, sometimes you have flashes where she looks like her JJ self. Sometimes, you know, she may be a step behind. But I think right now the main thing for the Liberty is just, let's just get to the end of the season and then let's regroup from there.
Right. You know, as MJ was saying, it's almost like, well, the way MJ described it, you know, the Liberty they're a cheat code. Yeah. Right. And I think fans across the league, I think they would agree. I think they're arguably the deepest, if not the second deepest team in the league. You know, I mean, whatever. That's debatable, but I'm saying it's there. But is there, like, you know, there was recently an article, I believe in the New York Post, and, you know, like Breanna Stewart, Natasha Cloud, they gave a couple quotes saying, like, you know, there are times where, you know, they may get a stop, but it's just they don't really know, you know, what to do. Or even on the opposite side, defensively, like, they can see what the teams are running, but they're like, okay, are we supposed to double? Are we supposed to hedge? If I do hedge, right, who's supposed to, you know, come up and, like, provide help? Things like that. And obviously for fans, it's like, whoa, the playoffs start next week. These aren't kind of like the quotes you want to be hearing from your star players. But, I mean, do you kind of attribute that mostly to just, again, lack of chemistry because of all the players being in and out? Or is it perhaps something about the roster? Like, I think we can all say, hey, wow, this is a deep roster. Everyone's so talented, but maybe it just doesn't actually provide the right lineup combinations where they can get on the same page. Is it one of those two? Is it somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I would think it's more so on the injury side. And, you know, I tweeted out something earlier today that I think you saw, Garano, where I talk about, you know, the continuity factor. Like, when you look at teams, usually the teams that have the most success have some type of chemistry that's built throughout a sustained period of time. You know, when we talked about, like, the 2023 Liberty, the main thing surrounding the team was, okay, like, they have the talent, but they've never really played together. So, like, how could they put it together and compete for a championship? And They were able to put it together at stretches, but then they ultimately lost the finals. And you could see at times where the chemistry factor played a part. But then coming into 2024, now they've had that whole year of chemistry under their belt. They also had the pain of losing to the finals. So you had that continuity factor that really propelled them to a title. This year, even if you look at the 9-0 start that they had at the beginning of the season, you still had most of your pieces from that championship core. But now you add like Natasha Cloud and, even Beck Gardner, who, even though she didn't play last year, she was around the team for most of that picture. So she had an idea of what was going on. But now when you have blocks where it could either be JJ out, because if you think about it, you've gone from a period where you have a month of JJ out and now having to learn how to play with JJ out for a month, to now having to adjust to playing now a month plus with Stewie out.
Right.
While in the middle of that, having all these other pieces, like it could be Natasha out for a little bit of a stretch. It could be Sab out for a stretch. Kennedy Burke was out for a stretch in tandem with all these things. While you're still trying to acclimate Emma Miesemann into the fold. While you're trying to add Steph Talbot into the fold. It's very hard to really get that chemistry in these short periods of time. Whereas, like, if this was a Liberty team where we had the roster it is now at the beginning of the season, and these issues that we're seeing are happening after 30, 40 plus games, I think that would have been the cause for concern. But when you look at the type of players, Emma Miesemann, the one thing that's always talked about her is just how versatile she is and how she's just able to adapt to whatever team she's at, and how her teams are able to have such an elevated level of success, whether it's the Mystics, whether it was Chicago for a bit, overseas with Fenerbahce, when you think of Belgium, that team's a 2-time Eurobasket champion. And you look at all these other players, they can do multiple things on the floor. They have the versatility. It's just that they've never really had now the appropriate time to put it together. Like, the Liberty went weeks without actually having to practice because they were on the road, just going and traveling. So, like, it's very hard to really get that chemistry built and that continuity when you just have so many pieces moving here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, especially like what you said with the injuries. So do you think this core has enough continuity to like propel them to another championship?
I think with Brianna Stewart back, with JJ in the fold, with Emma, I think they understand like what they've played for the past few weeks is not that championship caliber that they expect out of themselves.
Right.
And I know that they hold themselves in high regard. And I think the main thing is to look for is, how do they look when they have everyone back? That's including Sabrina. That's including Niara. Like, what does that full Liberty roster look like? And can they really put it together? It's going to be hard because the playoffs are literally right around the corner. But I think they have enough experience in the league as veterans. They've all been in some form of championship picture. They've all been in high-level basketball stakes when you think of JJ and Stewie and Sab and Emma. KB's had a lot of experience overseas. I think they know what they need to do. It's just a matter of, can they get it done in such a short amount of time? But they seem optimistic, and I think everyone else should be optimistic for them as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, heading into the playoffs, again, as you said, it's next week.
Quick fast already.
Yeah, even accounting for all these, kind of lack of collective reps together, right, with a full intact core. I mean, as you said, they're battle tested, at least, well, some collectively, but definitely individually, right? They've all been playing in like high stakes situations, championship level competition. But, these last several weeks, like even last night, they pulled out the win against Seattle. But there's a stretch where this is kind of what Natasha Cloud was alluding to, that like they can't seem to do anything well offensively or defensively. Like it'll happen for like maybe like a 5-minute stretch. And that's when teams can either build a lead or climb back in. Same thing happened against the Valkyries, right? Early in that game a couple days ago. Valks, like they just had this stretch where it's just there's turnovers, and then on the other end, like even when like off of a stop, like they're just again out of sync. In the past, it seemed like when the Liberty would go through lulls, it was one or the other. Like at least last year on their championship team. Like, okay, we went through like a 3 to 4 minute stretch where we can't hit a bucket, but we're defending and we're getting stopped. So we're basically just, it's like 0-0. We're just playing a rock fight in that stretch. Or it's like, okay, we can't get stops, but we can go bucket for bucket with you. I know it's only a week, but as you were saying, like having seen this team like on a daily basis, what do you think that they can do to kind of mitigate those lulls? What like something that they can lean on, or something that you think they'll have to lean on, you know, especially to just grind out a win in these early rounds as they're getting all their players back from injury?
Yeah, I think that's a very, good insight, because I think you are correct. There are stretches this season where it kind of just looks awry sometimes on both ends of the floor. And I think you alluded to that quote that, Natasha Cloud put about in the New York Post. And I thought it was very poignant. She talked about, it being on the defensive end, because I think like when you have so many players coming in and out, it's hard to really get that level of, because chemistry, I think a lot of people think about just from an offensive end and, just running the plays, getting your sets, playing through that. But a lot of times defensively, you need chemistry there in terms of knowing, okay, like where should I be for the nail help? Where should I be for switching? Where should I be, in general situations? And that part, I think, is going to be the more difficult aspect, because I think defensive chemistry is something that just really gets built through reps, really, and play and seeing multiple teams, which they've never really had that kind of consistent stretch of players together on the floor defensively that you would want for this team heading into the playoffs. Offensively, I think it's just going to be more of, relying a little bit more on their natural IQ, because, Brianna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, Evan Bieseman, Sabrina, these are very high IQ players. And I think what's going to be big for them is, especially when sets and plays get blown up on the offensive end, really, finding ways to play out of it and letting the game come to them, rather than maybe trying to force that issue or force that set that's just not working. Like really get back to their own skill sets and their own natural talent.
Okay, I have another question. So I know New York had more of a defensive identity last season. Do you feel like them losing KT, Kayla Thornton, and not having Benai Jelani is like impacting them this year as well, at least on the defensive end?
I think yes and no to some degree, because I think if you look at it, you kind of lose
nothing because of Brianna and JJ.
But then you kind of add Natasha Cloud, who is an all defensive caliber guard. A little bit different from what you would get from Benija, obviously, but then you also are bringing in a healthy Beck Gardner, and then later on in the season, you bring in Steph Talbot, who you were hoping to have as like a bigger defensive caliber wing. So it's hard, because I think with Benija and KT, at least KT, one of the things that stood out is the hustle factor. That's someone that's always going to, go out, get the offensive rebound. She's going to be physical. She's going to make life tough.
I like that you mentioned that. I've always been calling her that.
KT's, dog. Like, she's going to make life tough. And you saw that with the Valkyries this season, and was a big factor for the Valkyries, success. I know Conrad has definitely seen a lot of KT this season and what he was seeing.
That's right.
If you want to give us KT back, we'd be proud to take her back next year.
Like, oh, you didn't want to leave? Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
We just couldn't keep you.
Well, again, that speaks to the death of your team, that she was, unprotected. So
yeah, exactly. But I think, it's a hard question to gauge, because they've lost some key attributes defensively, but I think they've also gained some key attributes defensively elsewhere, while keeping the main core of, you still have a 6'4" Leonie Fibich out there with Stewart, who can do so much things, with Jonquel that can do so much things. Emma is no slouch defensively, especially down low in the post and in that interior stuff, what she can do. I think it's really, and I know, like, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I really do think it's more so like the chemistry and lack of reps, because when you don't really know, I can't really say when you don't know how to play with each other, but like when you don't have that amount of time playing with each other and seeing certain situations repetitively over 20, 30 games, versus maybe minutes at a time, it's
Right.
very hard to really get into a flow on that end.
Okay. I ain't think about it
Right.
that way. Like basically, whatever, if Brianna goes this way guarding somebody, you know, for people that don't understand, for the casuals, like, you know, everybody else that's new or just hasn't played with them enough will be able to react and read everything accordingly. Like, oh, she's probably gonna go that way like this, so let me do that. Yeah, I agree with that. That's kind of something that I've been feeling like, you know, they're not as defensive as they were last season.
Yeah, I think it's really a chemistry, and there's actually a stat that I saw that Jackie Powell, who also covers the Liberty, she put out today that, you know, the Liberty actually tied with this year's Dallas Wings. They tied a WNBA record for most unique starting lineups in a season with 18.
Or okay.
So when you have 18 different starting lineups for a season,
yeah, and 44 games. That's a
like,
third.
I mean, it's fun in 2K.
More than a third.
In 2K, yeah, and that's the thing. Like,
Right.
I think like one thing we have to recognize is basketball is not like 2K where you can just like play on Dynasty or franchise mode and just, you know, pick players and say, okay, this is gonna work. Like, okay, they have a 85 overall on-ball defense, 75, 83. Okay, I'll make it work. No, like there's a human and psychological component to it that when you are just in and out of the lineups, you're in and out of position, and the lineups can change at so many points. And even not just the starting lineups, but just some of the rotational minutes can change just because you have so many injuries.
Right.
Where is that level of consistency that you're going to be able to build? And I think that's really been the plague kind of with New York, is just the injuries, having players in and out. And I think hopefully once the Liberty are back at full strength, now they can kind of reset with everything being 0-0. And now let's take it one game at a time and let's see what happens in the playoffs.
And they have that many combinations too, thinking about it. Like they have enough where usually I feel like you have to have at least 3 types of looks going into the playoffs. And they kind of have it. You know what I mean? Having played without some of everybody pretty much this year. Even Emma just came over. So yeah, I agree with that. Go ahead, Con.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. You know, it's at this point they're ideal, right? I think the ideal lineup that we would all expect if everyone is back and available, right? Basically the lineup they had on opening day, right? So Sabrina, Natasha Cloud, Leonie Fibich, Brianna Stewart, and Jonquel Jones.
Yep.
You know, as Alfred mentioned, when they started that season in 9-0, and I think at one point, I think like Jonquel sat one of those games out, but still, right? That original starting lineup had the best net rating, you know, in the entire dub. Again, early season, but still, it is what it was, right? And I believe they had like the second best defensive rating, like only second to Minnesota. So there is, you know, reason to believe, yeah, okay, right? We can get back. But as Michael just said, and Alfred, you just said, right, there have been 18 different starting lineups throughout the season.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Which again speaks to the depth, speaks to the versatility. We expect the starting lineup to be the lineup we just discussed, but do you expect do you think there's a possibility or of any potential starting lineup changes, perhaps if it's matchup dependent? You know, like now that we can kind of see the way the standings, now going into the playoffs, like now that we can kind of see the seedings emerge. I mean, there's still some movement in 2 through 5, I think. But yeah, do you think that maybe like, okay, hey, there's a reason for Emma to go back into the starting lineup, or Kennedy Burke maybe, or something like that?
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think we saw it last year in the playoffs. So, you know, New York made the decision to sit Courtney Vandersloot and elevate Leonie Fibich to the starting lineup. I think it definitely is going to be matchup dependent because, like, for example, if you're facing a team like Atlanta, you might want to play a little bit bigger because that team has, you know, BG, it could be Bree Jones, it can be Nas Hillman, it could be Alicia Gray, it could be Ryan Howard. So you might want to have additional size on that floor. where New York could probably opt to do a 1 guard, 4 forwards lineup with like either Sab or Cloud with Leo, Stewie, JJ, and Emma. That could be one option. There may be times when New York keeps their regular starting lineup and feels like they can play well with the 2 guards in Cloud and Sab. So I think once the playoffs start, that's where things will get interesting, because Coach Brondell has shown that when it comes to the playoffs, she's not willing. I mean, she's not willing. She's not unwilling to try and do different lineups that she thinks can help the team win. I mean, you look at Game 5 of the finals. Who would ever think that we would see a lineup last year in a Game 5 series where you have Brianna Stewart running the point out there with Leo and KT and Niara and JJ, just a super big lineup. I mean, that I would like to see a lineup like that in the W consistently someday, just a super big lineup. But I think it goes to show that anything is possible in the playoffs, and I would actually be curious to see how New York adjusts their lineup based on their matchups.
Yeah, they'll probably just, I could see them kind of having it how they had it last season, like or last playoffs, I should say, where Leone stepped up, and then all of a sudden in key moments, Niara's making big plays. Like, you guys have such a roster, bro. Like, you could plug in anybody and they can like really produce moments. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the timing of everything. I think when it comes to the playoffs, like, everything has to happen right when it needs to happen. You know what I mean? So you need timely buckets, you need timely stops, and you guys have a roster filled with those types of players. You know what I mean? And Kennedy's been amazing this year. Like, she's really stepped up this season. You know what I mean? So just
first 9 and no stretch. Like Kennedy was shooting 56% from 3.
Yeah,
first in 9 games, where like he had a phenomenal stretch, and then obviously like once injuries and stuff start to play a role. Now, her productivity, she's playing a little bit of position where she wasn't really playing to start the season. And then, she has a bit of an injury. And so it's just been unfortunate how the injuries have lined up, because it's not I think you talked about it, Michael, where it's not like it happened earlier in the season and then it just happened throughout. It was like stages where they also had other sub stages of injuries that just made everything this weird amalgamation at times. So
it's like they subbed out like tag.
Exactly. It's like,
it really was. Yeah.
I can't tell you the amount of times when it's like, okay, well, let's see what the injury report looks like this today.
I mean,
because it's like some of these were just surprises. It could have, some of these didn't even happen in games. It was just, something that happened in practice. It was an illness that happened out of the blue. So like when you have a season like that, it's just tough. But again, I think if we had these issues with a Liberty team that played 30 to 40 games, and we still had these same issues with them playing from like this from game 1 to now, that would have been a very, very significant concern.
Yeah.
But when you just have injuries and things out of the whack, it's just hard to really say like, okay, because we know that they have the pieces. We know that the front office and the organization has put together the best team that they could possibly field when you look at these names on paper.
Yeah.
Again, there's always that chemistry and on the court aspect. And if you don't really have that time, you don't have that chemistry, it just becomes harder to really get them in a flow. But again, regular season is going to come to a close. We'll see how it goes.
There's no true continuity. I get what you're spilling out here. I got a fun question for you.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at the playoff picture, and it's just you. This is just your choice. If you can choose their first round opponent, who would it be?
Oh, the Valkyries.
Uh-oh.
I've said like I have wanted to see, and it's not just per se because I'm on a pod with Conrad, but just from a storyline aspect. I mean, think of just how intriguing that would be. The first expansion team to make the playoffs versus the reigning champions. You have the former assistant GM of the New York Liberty, Ohema Nianin, going up against GM Jonathan Kolb. You have a team that Kayla Thornton got picked up by the expansion draft, now going up against a former team, even though she won't be playing.
I like this.
Talking about 2 teams that have dabbled heavily into the international scene, with the Valkyries picking up players like Janelle Salon and Ileana Rupert and Carla Late. facing off against their French national teammate in Marine
right.
You know, so I think when you look at all of these different things, you think of Valhalla versus Barclays Center, like that. Just so many interesting. Like,
are you building the manifesto for this?
Sabrina versus her hometown.
Sabrina and the Bay Area connections. You know, so just so many things.
Okay, yeah, we need this.
I would, you know, East Coast versus West Coast. I think there's just so many interesting layers that I think that would really make a fun first round matchup. I don't know if it will happen, but if I was in control, I would love to see it.
Nice. I think you guys got to get up to number 3, right? So if I'm looking at the standings correctly,
I don't know what will happen, but that would be my dream first round. If I could play around and change the seedings anyway, that's what I would want.
Nice.
Well, then, actually, before I get to my question, I'm going to flip Michael's question. Who would you least want to face in the first round?
The Aces. Right now, or Atlanta.
I think right now, some fans or some people may have a pause for concern, but I think that probably would be a great chapter into that Aces versus Liberty rivalry, in the sense that they would have now faced each other in 3 consecutive playoffs. One in the finals, one in the semifinals. I mean, a first round matchup might probably be a little bit earlier than the league ratings.
Right.
But I think that would probably be a good way of testing the Liberty to see, like, okay, the playoffs are going to be harder. Can you face that old bugaboo Aces that's always been, you know, around your back? Can you face them, especially with how hot they're looking right now? Go on to defeat them and then probably face tougher matchups. That would actually be an interesting one. I would say the matchup you probably least would want is maybe Phoenix, just because, you know, Phoenix has been a team that's has had New York's number quite a bit. I think I'm curious to see, like, I think AT's versatility has really shown in those types of matchups, along in tandem with Satu. Like, they play a very similar style of play in terms of pacing, in terms of spacing, in terms of what they want to do. But I think Phoenix is a team that has definitely given New York problems. And I don't know if New York would want to see them immediately versus, you know, now having time to settle down and face them, let's say, in the semifinals.
That's interesting. Even with Phoenix not, I mean, they have Natasha Mack, but like not really having a true.
They don't play. They don't play.
They don't play that way.
That's what I'm saying. They play a very unorthodox style.
Yeah.
That I think, like, even like if you think about with Minnesota last year, like, you knew what you were going to get with Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you now just adapt and how do you stop it? Like, you know, Minnesota is going to run high ball screens with Courtney Williams and feet. You know, you're going to have to worry about Kayla McBride coming off of staggers and pin downs. You knew, like, the things you're going to have to worry about.
Right.
But with Phoenix, they can do all of these different sets. But what makes it interesting is they can invert a lot of the things. Because the one thing that I've always been interested in is how they've been, the success they've had with doing a lot of the inverted stuff with AT and Makani especially. Because if you look at, like, a player like Monica Cohen-Makani, she was phenomenal over in France, and her go-to and bread and butter was really, you know, coming off of screens, and, you know, if players go above, that little pocket of space for the pull-up two is right there, kind of a Courtney Williams-esque game. But Phoenix has done a lot of those inverted stuff where, you know, she's kind of screening for AT and they flow out into those things while you're still having players like Satu and Ka and others. So I'd be interested to see, like, how that matchup works, but I don't know if that's a matchup you want right out of the gate if you're New York.
That's an interesting pick. Go ahead, Con.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's going to put a lot of pressure on, like Sabrina.
It's like
coming out
almost
of injury.
Yeah.
With the nature of, like, those having to switch those inverted pick and rolls, that's a lot. That is a lot to do in a first round matchup, especially when it's a 3-game series. You know,
and it's almost like New York in that case would have to play smaller, wouldn't they? Like, they would probably have to drop Leone out of the starting lineup. It would have to just be Brianna and JJ. Like, I couldn't see it any other way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that that's sustainable the way that they play with AT. And that's I love that. I like that matchup.
Yeah, and then also one thing you have to factor is like if New York, let's say, drops out of the top 4 now, like you're starting on the road. So I mean, to start versus Phoenix on the road, and then like ideally you'd want to win. I think there's a lot of pressure now for you to win that first game because ideally you'd want to close out that best of 3 at home back at Barclays rather than now having to close out on Phoenix and then go from Phoenix to another. Because now it was going to be best of 5 in the second round. So now you have to go from being on the road for that closeout game to now even more games on the road for your second round.
Yeah.
And to do it against a team like Phoenix, that could be dicey.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I like that perspective. Go ahead, Kyle. You got some more?
Yeah. This one's actually kind of an interesting question. I know a lot of fans, they love to discuss things like this, like, who's the man or who's her, right? Like, who's the alpha dog of a given team. Every fan base does that. And normally I think that question, those discussions are largely irrelevant because you're a team, like you don't play 1 versus 5. It's still a team game. However, I do think it's relevant when it comes to like team building. Are you trying to build a team around a specific player's skill set? Are you trying to, focus all the action to emphasize, whatever a specific player does? So all of that's to say is, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. In 2023 and 2024, I felt like this team was largely built around Stewie. Mm-hmm. Is this team still Breanna Stewart's team? Like, is it still built around her?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot of people would wonder. Like, I think the Liberty are at a point where it's really nobody's team. I think it's the big three's team, really, in terms of Sab and JJ and Stu, because I think this team has been built to complement those 3 players as a whole, rather than just building around one player and then let the chips fall where they may. And I think even heading into 2023, 2024, I still think it was budding into that direction. And I think something that fans may not realize is I think 2022 was actually the precursor to all of that. Because if you look at how that Liberty team was built, you saw a little bit of the pieces. They just upgraded tenfold. You had Sab there that you knew. And then, you also had an additional ball handler there later on in the season with like Crystal Dangerfield, etc. Right. But then if you look at the front court with Steph Dolson and Natasha Howard, if you think about Steph Dolson, you're thinking about it like a 6'5", 6'6" big that can post up, that can contribute on the interior, but can also step out and knock down perimeter threes. When you think of Natasha Howard, you're thinking of a long, 6'1", 6'2" wing that can also play in the post, but can also do things out in the perimeter. And I think New York kind of used that blueprint. You still had Benaja. Well, Benaja missed a lot of the season with the injury, but you still had that blueprint. But now, when you look at how they've built the team, now you go from Natasha Howard to Breanna Stewart. You go from Steph Dolson to Jonquil Jones. You go from Sab is still there, Benaja is still there. You go from a Beck Allen to a Leonie Fiebich.
Right.
So I think you've had that blueprint, but now they've just elevated it to the pieces that they know can fit and can really propel them into that title picture.
Yeah, and I think their pieces are all interchangeable. To be honest, I feel like the acquisitions that they made in the offseason made it where they literally, like could swap every position and still have a flow. It's just like the continuity factor, like you've been mentioning, like pretty much throughout the episode. Like, I'm big on continuity. Like, I feel like teams that grow together, come up together, learn together over years, like that means something. You know what I mean? And we're talking about just in this season alone. So them not having that, like, you know what I mean? Like, continuity is big, and people need to actually.
I mean, look at the Aces. I mean, that's a team that they needed that era of continuity and learning and growing together to become 2-time champions.
Exactly.
They had to go through their own growing periods where they had a big loss in the playoffs that stung, but they had their core group that came back stronger than ever in 2022, and that helped propel them to a title. They still had some of that pieces that even though they were missing some players in that series versus New York in the finals, with Chelsea Green, Kia Stokes being out.
Yeah.
Still had Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, Kelsey Plum, who were there for the bulk of the season, that had that continuity factor where, you know, when you needed that type of effort, you still got it. In a season like this with New York, you know, they've just been so much in and out.
Right.
It's really been tough for them to kind of get that level of continuity that they didn't really need to worry about last year. Because even last year, they still had some injuries. They still had players in and out, but not to the level of what we've seen this year.
Yeah. I think it can work out though. Like I mentioned earlier, like they'll have different looks in the playoffs, and then you insert the actual. If everybody's healthy, you can insert those players into. Oh, we're gonna play through Saab, or we're gonna play through Brianna, JJ, Emma, whoever. You know what I mean? And then you bring the players back that are like, if they're all healthy, and then suddenly you have that IQ on, you know, what you guys are gonna set out on the floor and what you're gonna do, what your game plan is. Like, it's gonna make them kind of like a wild card. I think like they will be. Like they're equipped for any matchup, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also maybe one good point you can kind of bring up, and I'll be curious, is given that they've necessarily not had that level of continuity, if you're an opposing team, how do you scout for a team that's not had that level of continuity?
Something that you can attack. That's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean.
How do you scout? Because, like, again, I don't like the lineup last year we saw in Game 5 of the finals was 3 at the point. They never ran that lineup all season, but they were able to have some success in the final. So if Coach Brondello opts for a very unorthodox lineup that we've never seen, if you're a team, like, how do you prepare for that, knowing that you've never really had enough film or enough data to really go up against that type of matchup in a high stakes playoff game?
Yeah. That's why, I fully agree with that. They are the dark horse now. I'm gonna officially say that they're the dark horse. The champion, but they're the dark horse.
They'd have to put like their assistants really to test, you know, to work, like scouting like 18 different lineups. Try to pick apart, right?
So what game are we gonna go off of?
Speaking of continuity, and you actually kind of brought it up, like, you know, as you said, the liberty that we saw today or these last couple years were being like the foundation was essentially the template was being built even prior to Brianna Stewart joining the team. But you also mentioned like Sabrina, like not just like her own maturation and development, you know, individually. It's basically like getting 2-3 free agents, right? From where she started to where she is now. I know out here in the Bay Area, like fans, we all love her, right? Even when she comes in, you know, like as an opponent, she still gets like, you know, a chorus of applause, you know. And of course, I've been on a number of podcasts and people always ask my opinion. Do I think Sabrina will ever come to the Valkyries? I want to make it clear. Like my answer has been no, no. And only because I truly believe that from the outside looking in, like we talked about at the top of the episode about culture, she seems to be as like ingrained and foundational of a part of the Liberty culture, you know, as any other player or coach or figure on that team. Can you speak to like, from what you see, you know, covering the team, can you speak not to just Sabrina's development as a player, how she's kind of emerged as, you know, she was even in discussions for, you know, the early MVP discussions, but both as a player, but also as like someone in the New York, you know, Brooklyn community?
You know, I think Sabrina is the type of player that most New Yorkers can, you know, resonate with. You know, when you talk about a player that just works hard, that's really, you know, puts her head down and is just really about her craft and really developing and really getting better year after year. And we've seen it, you know, especially like her coming off that major injury in her rookie year that kind of hampered her in 2021. Fans really seeing how she took a leap from that 2021 where she was somewhat healthy, but not to the level of Sab we were expecting, to now taking a leap in 2022 where she, you know, was averaging almost near triple-double at spurts. You know, you're talking about someone that hosts camps, that's always doing, you know, events in the city to connect with the youth. We're talking about a player that's really become a face of New York sports. To talk like Sabrina Ionescu is ironically enough, well, I shouldn't say ironically because she's that talented, but she is the first ever player in a New York basketball jersey, Knicks, Nets, Liberty on a 2K cover.
Hey, don't start the controversy about that. I was like one of the only people not mad about that. Plus, I'm a Kobe guy too. You know, like that's my goal. And I'm just like, she came from, are y'all? And then also she was like, what was it with her? Like she was already borderline averaging triple doubles and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, you know, because I potted so much about that because I was really high on Sabrina. Like Sabrina's going to pull them into the playoffs. What did she do? Pull them into the playoffs. Like Sabrina has actually earned her keep, and to me, she is the face of the Liberty. You know what I mean? Like when I think of the Liberty, I say, "Oh, that's Sabrina's team." You know what I mean? At least to myself, like, "Oh, Sabrina's team." Like I don't look at it as Brianna or JJ's. Like they went to her. That's one thing too, but that's Sabrina's team. So
yeah, and you know, I think it's hard to really be a successful player in New York because you know there's so many intangibles, there's so many factors you have to worry about, but Sabrina's, you know, risen to the challenges. And, you know, even when you think of 2023, not necessarily having the best finals, but coming back in 2024 and, you know, working on her craft, you know, like just legendary stuff like playing, like everyone I know, the detractors, I want to say, will probably bring up, oh, she shot 1 for 19, yada, yada, in game 5. But this is literally a player playing in a finals game with an injured hand, literally a torn ligament in her shooting hand, like a la something we would expect from, you know, Kobe, you know, like just stuff like that, you know, that grit and grind is stuff that New Yorkers can resonate with because New Yorkers are doing it every day. And when you see your star athlete or star players living in that same mold and doing the same things as you, it resonates. And when you're in the community, when you're doing events, when you're really trying to ingratiate yourself with the people, they respect that. And Sabrina has done a phenomenal job at that.
Exactly. And that's exactly when people ask me, like, you know, they see pushing as if I had any influence. But seriously, like when they say, Conrad, do you think she's going to come home? I'm like, I think she already is home.
Yeah.
You know, like make no mistake, like the Bay Area is where she was born. And, you know, she'll always have a home here. But I mean, New York is her home. Like I would be shocked if she left anytime soon. And again, that's a conversation for another day, you know, in terms of the off-season previews and stuff like that. But before we go, again, I promised that we wouldn't talk too much about scouting, and we won't. Not now.
We'll wait.
But
we'll wait.
You know, we talk about the players, talk about Sandy Brondello, a guy who definitely does get mentioned, but probably not enough, you know, but in the scouting community, in the analytics community, like a lot of people I talk to, his name always comes up, Jonathan Kolb. You know, Alfred, you are like very, very well versed in like every transaction, big or small, that he does. And I love how you always emphasize there is no such thing as an irrelevant or a small signing or transaction. Can, you know, they always say in professional sports, every professional sports end up becoming a copycat league, you know? And again, I keep hearing Jonathan Kolb's name because people want to, you know, try to learn from what he's done, how he was able to build such a talented roster, a deep and talented roster. Can you kind of speak to like Jonathan Kolb, his philosophy, perhaps things that people don't understand? Because people just see the final product. They just see the roster. But can you kind of speak to like his approach behind the scenes and how he goes about, you know, you know, putting together and, you know, really scouting the talent, but more so aligning them so that it seems like there's always this nice influx of talent on hand?
Yeah, so I think with Jonathan Kolb, it's multifaceted in a sense, because I think the one thing that sometimes doesn't get talked about enough that Jonathan Kolb is big about is relationship building. And that's something that's key from any front office, is to have a good rapport with players, whether it's incoming players, players around the league. Like they're players that, you know, may have been moved on to the Liberty, but still have a good relationship with the organization because of, you know, that relationship they have with Jonathan Kolb. You can think of, you know, either whether it be Jalen Sherrod now moving to Minnesota. You can think of even when Dede Richards was, you know, playing elsewhere in the league. Like a lot of people commend Jonathan Kolb's ability to really show a vested interest in you as a player and as a person. But when it comes to now more of the organizational standpoint, one of the things that Liberty and Jonathan Kolb and his scouting department and staff have always wanted to do is they've always wanted to be ahead of the curve on things. They always want to be ahead of the latest trends. And when you think of something like you talk about the international presence, like they're always working around the clock to see who are some of these talents that are not necessarily getting as much bandwidth over here that can play at a WNBA level. You know, if you weren't following Leonie Fibic at all, you would wonder, like, okay, who is this Leonie Fibic character? But this is a player that overseas at the time was on her way to becoming a 2-time Spanish League LFNDESA MVP. This is a player that has played in EuroLeague for quite a bit, like someone that's developed. And that's something that you can argue some teams over here necessarily were not paying attention to, is that rise of overseas quality level talent. And it's no surprise when you think of like what the Valkyries have done when you have a GM that's basically learned from.
That's why I loved it. I loved it. Yeah. So
I think that's really been their main thing, is being ahead of the curve, but also finding ways to win on the margins, in the sense that it's not necessarily about the biggest or flashiest acquisition. Like, yes, you have MVPs in Brianna Stewart and Jonquil Jones, great players in Sabrina, but when you're able to acquire someone like Kennedy Burke, someone who was in the league before, played for multiple teams, but, you know, decided to develop her craft overseas. And she became a multiple-time French League MVP, the same league that has. She actually played with Janelle Salon at Villeneuve d'Ascq. She was playing against the Layla Lacans of the world, like high-quality players overseas. She played under Coach Rashid Mezian, who's, you know, now with the Suns. So when you're able to find players like that that may not necessarily be the biggest name, but are actually developing and working on their craft that can be a fit for a championship piece. Those are the types of players that Jonathan Kolb and his organization have always looked for. Do you think of the Rebecca Gardner trade? You know, making that gamble of being willing to trade 2 second-round picks for someone that they knew was not going to be immediately available, but when healthy, can be someone that can produce. You think of going back to the Leonie Fibic acquisition, you know, being willing to part with a former Rookie of the Year in Michaela Onyenwere for someone that they felt could really be a big piece of their championship puzzle. And what was Leonie Fibic? A big part of their championship puzzle.
Yeah.
So that's really been their philosophy. It's not just about the big names. It's really about how can we get other pieces that work within the salary cap space, because, you know, the WNBA is a hard cap. And something that, you know, we do have to mention is Jonathan Kolb did used to work for the league office in salary cap management. So this is someone that knows what to do and knows the margins, knows the CBA in and out, and he is working within the constraints of that and is finding ways to be creative while also making sure you have an organization that's building the right relationships with people.
Nice. I like that. Who does New York have stashed right now? Because I think they have someone stashed right now.
New York has a lot of people.
I forgot.
So New York has quite a few players. You have Raquel Herrera, who plays for the Spanish national team, 6'3", a very versatile forward, someone that could be an interesting piece. And let me preface, a lot of these stash pieces that they have are all 26 and under, really, for the most part. So you also have young pieces. And that's another thing that they're being good at, is finding ways to acquire young players while having low draft capital, since they only had a 3rd-round pick in this draft, which they used on a stash piece, Aja Khan. Another example of Jonathan Kolb and the team's philosophy. Aja Khan was someone that I don't think anybody had on their mock boards as an international prospect.
Right.
Well,
well, Khan, yeah. And I learn about them as I hear, if I'm not watching sometimes. But yeah, I know they got some stashes. Like, they're kind of Valkyrie-ish in that way. Like, they've been that way.
Well,
but just
I think the Valkyries are Liberty-ish in there.
Okay. Well, no,
Ihema is from Jonathan Kolb's, you know, front office tree, I guess you could say. So, I mean,
okay.
Yeah. to continue on to your point, MJ, like Aja Khan, someone that, and I'll let you go, Corrado. Aja Khan, someone that was a 6'3" shot blocker, and something that I was surprised no one mentioned is she was a top 5 shot blocker in the same French league as Dominique Malanga, where Dominique Malanga and her were 2 of the top 5 shot blockers in the French league at 19, 20 years old.
Right.
So, like those are the types of pieces that you really have to go out and look for when you're trying to build a team. It's not just about the now, but it's also about the future.
Exactly. I like that. You got anything else, Kai?
Just one other thing, actually, because obviously, again, like you said, right? Leone Fievich took the league by storm, right? It took the fans by storm. But again, if you're someone like yourself, or perhaps you enjoy watching like international hoops or overseas hoops, you would have been a little bit more familiarized with her. But that's the thing, right? Like the amount, not just the level of competition she was playing, but the development that she was undergoing was not necessarily in the purview of WNBA fans. So I say all that because Jonathan Kolb, the front office, they clearly have an ability to identify talent that is, like, as you said, right, kind of, I don't want to say overlooked, but just they're not in the spotlight, at least in the American spotlight. But how much? So it's one thing to identify the talent, but how much communication does the Liberty front office have with all the players that they have reserve rights on? Like, are they communicating with those players' teams on a regular basis? Because it seems like when they do come to the Liberty, like they're ready to go. There seems to be very little ramp up when they finally make the jump to the W.
Yeah, and that's goes back to the relationship building part that I spoke about with Jonathan Kolb. Like they usually are in communication with players that they have stash rights on. It's not just like, okay, we have your rights, and then there's just radio silence. Like they do have a vested interest in their development. They have a vested interest in seeing how they produce and if they can be a potential member of the Liberty rotation. So they're usually in pretty good communication with these players and ensuring that they know like they have aligned with them overseas. So it's not just, okay, we're not hearing from them. And I think that's something Leone actually referenced upon coming over to Liberty, where she said that like when her rights were with other teams, she didn't hear anything from them. Wow. So like that goes to show you like that's another crucial aspect as an organization is it's not just about the players you have here, but for the players abroad, you still have to make them feel like they are truly a part of the organization, because they are a part of the organization.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Alfred, for coming on. I don't know why, as long as I've been podcasting, why you ain't been a part of something I've been doing. It's been so long, brother, since we've been following each other. You've been doing great work. And before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you and your work as well.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on, I don't know if people still say Twitter, but you can find me on Twitter, now known as X, at Alford Corriette. You can find me there. I also have a YouTube channel, Alford Corriette. You can find me at a little bit more consistent on Twitter than I am on the YouTube, but still planning to get back on the YouTube, especially with international season is starting soon. So definitely keep your eyes out for stuff that I'll be putting out there. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
Thank you. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, Alfred, MJ, Conrado, we out. Have a good day.